Hello, and welcome to this week's video blog from the Center for Human Awakening. My name is Rob Meager. I'm co-founder of the center along with Richard Harvey. And in this week's video blog, I'll share a passage, a reading from Richard Harvey's book, Your Essential Self. This passage is titled, Giving to Ourselves, Working with the Ego. When the Zen Roshi, Shunryu Suzuki, was asked, "How much ego do you need?" he replied, "Just enough so that you don't step out in front of a bus." Ego is an activity of our small self that enables us to be in the world. Ego negotiates between desire and conscience and enables us to be introspective and self-aware. Consequently, ego occupies an ambiguous place in our inner world. The difficulty lies not so much in having an ego, but in attaching ourselves so strongly to the ego and its pursuits that we cannot see the difference between what the ego is doing and who we are. Ego is a human function, a mental creation to which we are attached. When the automatic functioning of the ego becomes fixed, it creates a psychic prison, and we turn into our means of survival. This is how the ego oppresses and confines us. It selects certain aspects of ourselves and maintains that is all we are through identification, while confining the rest of us to the shadows of our unconscious. Ego is a great preserver, conforming and resistant to change. Ego expresses itself in the mask of character that conceals our genuine thoughts and feelings. While we need an ego as a vehicle for our individual life, we must shed our attachment to it in order to become who we really are. The ego is to our inner world as our body is to the outer, merely a vehicle. The price of identifying with ego is high. Conceit, pretense, false pride, and self-importance are all ego tendencies that cause suffering. Ego plays the superior-inferior game of, "I am better than you," or "You are better than me." Ego uses thought to dissect experience and juggles with our centers so that we remain separate and alone. Our first experience of separation is separating from our mothers who nourish and sustain us from conception to infancy. As we move toward autonomy, we move from dependency to independence, from being given to giving to ourselves. What and how we give to ourselves reflects back on our ego. Ego survives through separation, but when we give to ourselves, we are faced with an exchange between self and other that challenges our separateness. So, becoming aware of how we give to ourselves is a most effective way to expose the ego. We find it hard to accept being given to. Receiving can feel threatening to the ego and our sense of separation. The way we receive depends on how strongly we are attached to our ego. The looser the hold, the easier it is for us to receive. The tighter the hold, the harder it is for us to receive. It is a kind of immediate karma that reveals the nature of desire. Desire maintains a deceitful dynamic. It is like a train on an endless track that refuels without losing momentum or stopping and never reaches its destination. Our lives lurch between two poles of insecurity, the fear of not getting what we want and the fear of getting what we want. Many years ago, I explored this two-faced fear in the form of the question, what do I want now? Working with this question resulted in some strange and profound insights. At first, I had fantasies of spectacular scenarios of desire, sexual, gastronomic, financial, prestigious, and ambitious. I imagined intense scenarios of fulfillment, but as I carefully watched myself, I saw that the feeling of desire triggered a distancing mechanism in me. The object of my desire had to be remote, out of reach, and spiraling away from me. But when I stayed with the question, what do I want now? Something curious happened. The spiral went into reverse and turned toward me with equal force, causing desire to wind back and come to rest inside me. In this way, my fantasized extremes of desire transformed into simple needs like, I want a cup of tea, or I want to go for a walk. The question, what do I want now, taught me a lot about myself, how much I distanced myself from fulfilling any desires, how desperate I was to have what I wanted, and how scared I was. How spiraling out protected me from the feelings of fulfillment and frustration. How I placed myself between fear and hope and prolonged and strengthened desire by being fully in neither place. Having what we want dispels the fantasy and the magic in which the wished-for thing is bathed. Having what we want would be dangerous. We would become complacent, succumb to our fears, and be consumed by our lack. We would grow miserable at our satisfaction. Desire is as complex as the human being who feels it. We fear getting what we want because satiating our desire would mean the cessation of desire, which in turn would mean the end of our identity with the ego. Because without desire, there is no ego. It is a deep contradiction that ego encourages us to fulfill our desires while forbidding us to quell desire entirely. One desire leads to another, apparently endlessly. Ego depends on frustration. We get a little of what we want, but never all that we want. We don't always want what we need, and when we get what we need, we don't always receive it so gracefully. A middle-aged man named Jeffrey, a chief executive in the civil service, came to see me because he was having a hard time with his inner child. His historical models of adulthood were his mother, a lifelong martyr, and his father, a retired high-ranking policeman. His parents, ambitious for his future, had pressured him to achieve, to be ambitious at school and in his career, and to value work over play. The result was a little boy who resented missing the opportunities to be creative and have fun. Somewhat predictably, he had become a workaholic with a fiercely crammed personal schedule that allowed no time for pleasure. Fun was almost a dirty word to him. I encouraged him to ask the child within him what he wanted and what his idea of fun was. Jeffrey listened quietly to himself for a minute and then turned to me shamefacedly. Well, what did he say? I asked expectantly. Alton Towers, he replied. Alton Towers is the largest theme park in the United Kingdom, with roller coasters, water rides, candy floss, and spectacle for family days out. Working against tremendous resistance from the hard-working adult part of him, Jeffrey took a day off to go to Alton Towers. When he returned to see me again, he was a different man, smiling, happy, and full of joy. He enthusiastically related details of the fun he had. He had to find a new definition for adult in his life, which included fun, relaxation, and excitement, and balancing pleasure with duty and responsibility. Like many of us, Jeffrey had to work with deceptive life statements that demeaned his self-worth, invalidated pleasure, and curtailed desire. Statements like, I don't deserve to have what I want. If I get what I want, it will be taken away. Only good children get what they want. You can only give to others when we have learned to give to ourselves. When we know ourselves well enough to ask and receive what we need, generosity wells up within us, and we are able to give as we have allowed ourselves to be given to. In time, the distinction breaks down, and giving and receiving begin to merge. We become aware of what we receive in the act of giving and what we give in the act of receiving. Forgiving and receiving are only possible where separation exists. When separation no longer exists, there is no giving or receiving, only connecting in true relationship. Without giving and receiving to reinforce it, the power of the ego is weakened. As our ego lightens its hold on us, our sense of limitation and confinement lessens. We see the door of our psychic prison, walk out through it, and release ourselves into a life of great potential where pleasure and work are not separate, where we can have what we really want, where ego is no longer a tyrant, and where we can respond to life.